Hi everyone, welcome to our third and final video on the highlights of grammar. In this one, I actually want to talk about apostrophes because that is probably the third area where I see a lot of individuals add apostrophes when words end in S, and that's not necessarily true. So just like with commas, I want us to think about whether an apostrophe is really necessary. So with that, let me head on back to our Google Doc page. And here is our Google Doc, and including in it a number of examples of using apostrophes. So there's really only two reasons to ever use an apostrophe. One is to make a contraction with a word, and the second is to show possession. If you're not showing possession or a contraction, then you don't need to use an apostrophe. There are many words that end in S or are plural words that end in S, and no apostrophe is necessary because we're not showing possession. So the first one I'll go over really quickly, which is using contraction. So instead of saying, do not sit there, we say, do not sit there. Not cite, do not sit there. We turn it into don't sit there. And we truncate and we shorten the do not into don't, and then we use the apostrophe. Now, just a word of caution, in formal legal writing, we generally do not use contractions. Get it? We do not use them. We don't use them. If we're quoting a witness or quoting testimony and the witness has spoken with a contraction, like, I can't believe what I saw, then we would obviously keep the quote intact and keep the contraction. But when we are writing letters to our clients, motions to court, whatever it is we're typing, an interoffice memo to our supervising attorneys, we generally do not use contractions. So I will get you in the habit of removing contractions if you have them. But I certainly wanted to make you aware that that is a proper grammatical reason to use an apostrophe, even though as a matter of style, we don't use the apostrophe we don't use a lot of contractions. Now, what about using an apostrophe to show possession? This we do use often in legal writing and in all of our kind of writing. So this is probably what you're most familiar with. A singular noun, like me, like Hallie, or someone named Brooke, or the word book, and we want to show possession. So when we show possession in English writing, we add an apostrophe S. We say, Hallie's book is red. Brooke's pen. The book's cover is black. So we're showing that the cover belongs to the book. The pen belongs to Brooke. The book, Hallie, the book belongs to Hallie. Now, these are pretty easy because these are all singular nouns, meaning just one noun that does not end in an S. So that makes it an easy way to do the contraction because you just add on an apostrophe and then an S. So we would say I'll just use somebody's name. We will say Bob. Bob's mom was visiting. So Bob is a singular noun. We show possession by adding the apostrophe S, and the mom belongs to Bob. So that's a really easy one. So again, you should use the apostrophe with an apostrophe S for singular nouns to show possession. Now let's make this a little bit more complicated. What about a singular noun? So this would be number one, singular nouns that do not end in S. I'll just number these on here as we go. What about number two? What about singular nouns that do end in S? This is a little bit more confusing. And here's some examples of them. For example, the word Congress. Congress is generally thought of to be a singular noun. There is one Congress. There's many members of Congress, but there's one Congress. What about somebody whose name ends in S, like the name James? That's, the name is not James. We don't say James and then apostrophe S. His name is James. What about somebody whose last name ends in an S? I had a student like this a couple of years ago, and it was great to use their last name as an example because this is something that person dealt with pretty regularly, was that their last name naturally ended in an S. So it wasn't Connors, but imagine the last name being Connors. Again, it's one person. So how do we show possession for one person whose name ends in S. Now here there is a debate among writers. Some would say we just add the apostrophe and we say James' book is read, like this, and we don't add the S apostrophe S. However, the Chicago Manual of Style and other legal writing experts do believe that you still add the S apostrophe S. So the name being James, when you make James to show possession, you add apostrophe S the same way you would if James did not have an S at the end. And then it kind of looks like James's book is read, or Jack Connors's book is read. One person named Connors and we're showing possession, one person named James and we're showing possession. This is my preferred way to show possession with a singular noun that ends in S. You may feel differently. I would defer to what your supervising attorneys or your boss likes, but I think this is an easy rule to remember because you just take the singular noun. Whether the singular noun ends in a different consonant, like Bob or Hallie or Brooke, or whether the singular noun ends in an S, we apply the same rule. We just do an apostrophe S to show possession. And the same thing would be true with Congress. You can say Congress's intent in passing the law or something like that, showing that the intent belonged to Congress. Now, we can complicate this a little bit more by now taking nouns that are plural. So remember, here it was singular noun that does not end in S, singular nouns that do end in S, and then number 3 is plural nouns, meaning more than one. And in the English language, most of the time to show plural, to show more than one, we add an S at the end. For example, one book versus many books. You guys probably already know that one. So books being plural. Now we don't know exactly how many. It could be 2 books, it could be 100 books, but we know that if we see the word book with an S at the end and no apostrophe, this word all by itself with no other context would mean many books or more than one book. Here, when we want to show possession, for plural nouns by adding an S, now we just add the apostrophe. The table's covers are blue. So look at the sentence by itself. The table's covers are blue. How many tables are there? I don't know. We just know it's more than one. Versus a sentence that said the table's cover was blue or is blue. Look at the meaning of these two sentences. In the first sentence, we know that we're talking about more than one table. Could be 2, could be 100, and that their covers are all blue. In the second sentence, we know we're talking about a singular table, and we have S apostrophe. But look at the different placement of the apostrophe here. What we do not do is the table's covers are blue. See, even though it's even trying to tell me this is not grammatically correct by underlining it. The table's covers are blue. This does not make any sense because a plural word, it's actually giving you the suggestion to go back to our first example right here. Okay, so now we've gone over 3 different examples of using apostrophes. Number 1, singular nouns that do not end in S, we add an apostrophe S. Singular nouns that do end in S to show possession, same rule. We add an apostrophe S. Plural nouns, when the plural is made plural by the addition of the S, to show possession, all we do is add the apostrophe. We don't need apostrophe then an S, because then that is a confusing, that's not a word, the tables is. Okay, you with me so far? Now, how about the last example? This is another unique English language thing, which would be what about, I'm just going to scroll down to these examples down here, which is for plural words in the English language that do not end in S. And a great example of this would be the word children. In the English language, child denotes a single child, but when we want to talk about two children or more than one child, we don't say childs, we say children to denote plural. When the noun becomes plural by changing the word, like child to children, we go back to our original rule of adding apostrophe s. The children's tables were covered in glue. Again, if I ask you how many children this refers to, or how many tables belong to the children, you would just say more than one. As opposed to this one, the child's tables were covered in glue, then it's one child with multiple tables. I'll let that sit for a second. But I think the big takeaway for understanding when to use the apostrophe is to look at the word that you're trying to show possession for and ask yourself, is that word a singular noun? Is it one person, one thing, like my example of Hallie's book? And if it's a singular noun, is it one that ends in S or doesn't end in S? It's actually easy to remember because we just add the apostrophe S. If we're talking about plural nouns, meaning more than one of whatever that noun is, and we want to show possession, we want to see if the word changes. If the word is the same word, like books, and all we're doing is adding an S to show plural, then we show possession by adding only the apostrophe. However, if the word changes, like child to children's, as some words in the English language do, we show possession by adding the apostrophe S. We wouldn't say the child's tables were covered in glue, because that's not a word in the English language. But we might say the child's tables were covered in glue when referring to just one child. I know this seemed like a pretty fast overview of all the grammar rules, and I agree that it was a pretty fast overview. But all of these examples are also provided in your textbook, and I've given you a lot more examples on your Blackboard page by linking to the Purdue OWL website. You can go through this Google Doc of examples. And again, my biggest piece of advice, if you don't like the way a sentence looks, if you're not sure about the possession or you're not sure about a comma, try to rewrite the sentence so that you don't have to worry about it. So that is the third and final of the grammar videos. The other videos to watch here have to do more with legal writing style. So I'll sign off here and you can move on to the legal writing ones as well.